I am starting our recording now. Kindly remain muted until the end of the presentation when I've stopped the recording. My name is Katrina Boyer, and we are going to be talking about how to hire an investment professional today. I'm so glad to have you here with us. If you have questions throughout the presentation, you're welcome to place them in the chat box. Otherwise, I do ask that you remain muted until the conclusion of the presentation. At that time, if you'd like to ask questions, you're free to unmute and ask away. So, with that, let's get started. Today, we're going to be talking about what we need to think about when we are determining our needs for saving and investing. We're going to talk about the 6 steps we need to take to research and come to a decision about the investment professional that may be right for us. And then, as usual, if you've not participated in our Midweek Money Matters, I always like to provide additional resources. The reality is, for each of the topics we cover, we can easily talk about the topics for much longer than 30 minutes. So I want to provide you with enough information that you can have a general understanding. And then from there, I provide those resources so you can learn more. So let's get started. One of the first things that we need to do is we need to sit down and think about what it is we're looking for in a professional. We want to step back and think about our age, our current financial situation. What are our goals? Are we looking to be able to retire in 15 to 20 years? Are we looking to be able to put a nice size down payment on a house in maybe 5 to 10 years? And then we want to sit back and think about how involved do we actually want to be in the process once we get our investments started. And then finally, are we looking to have our investment professional be what's considered a fiduciary, meaning they have a legal responsibility to make sure that they're doing what is best for you and your circumstances, or whether or not they just have to meet the suitability requirement, which requires that the professional provide you with options that would be suitable for your goals. And that sort of leaves that more open for you to make those decisions. So once you've kind of narrowed that down, you should be able to determine if you're looking to hire an investment advisor who is a person that is going to actually give you investment advice. They're going to take some time, get to know you, and then be able to provide you with what they think is right for your circumstances. They may or may not actually manage your financial assets, but they do have a fiduciary duty. Again, that means that they are required by law and regulation to do what's right for you. A broker dealer, on the other hand, is a person or company who is buying or selling securities. That may mean that they are doing that on your behalf, or they are doing that according to what you tell them to do. But the reality is that they are basically the middleman. They're the person that's connecting investors to investments. They have an obligation to provide you with resources that are suitable for you. Again, the difference there between suitability and fiduciary duty. It's really important that we understand that so that when we start to make those decisions, we're choosing the right professional for us. So once we know the type of professional that we're looking for, you can take the next 6 steps to find out the right professional for you. Now, one thing I do want to emphasize is that what's right for you today isn't necessarily what's right for you in 5 to 10 years. So it's important that we kind of revisit these steps from time to time so that we make sure that we are consistently staying where we need to be. So step number 1 is what I like to call smart shopping. The first thing we want to do when we start to think about buying a new car or whether or not we're going to go to vacation here or there, one of the first things that we do in those situations is we talk to people that we know and trust. The same can go for shopping for an investment professional. Talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors and your family members to see who they use. And then maybe ask them some additional questions. How long have you been using Joe Smith Investing? Or can you tell me what you like or maybe dislike about the professional that you've been using? And have you had anything that has had you have cause for concern? Are there any red flags that you've seen, things that made you uncomfortable? That can go a really long way in helping us to kind of narrow down the professional that we want to talk to. Now, we want to make sure that when we start talking to individuals, we're talking to people who have similar goals and maybe similar financial circumstances that we do, because we wouldn't necessarily want to hire the same professional for somebody who is already has a history of investing for 10 or 15 years and we're just getting started. That history goes a long way, but we need to be able to compare apples to apples. And so making sure that we are talking to individual professionals that have experience with our circumstances can go a really long way. So I always like to tell people, when you're asking those questions, make sure that you're talking to people who have similar goals that you do. Maybe their financial circumstances are similar, and maybe they are of the same mindset when it comes to investing. So that's step number one. Step number two is that we take those names of individuals and we make sure that they are properly registered. If you've been with us in the past, you know that I always encourage investors to verify the investment professional that they're working with is licensed or registered in the way that they should be. So make sure that you do that. You want to look at their history, see how long they've been doing in that industry, how long have they been involved in the investment world, and then take a look at what exams they've passed and understand what that means. Maybe you want to consider how many states they're licensed in. If you've got an investment professional who really does focus on one or two states, that can be kind of encouraging. But at the same time, maybe someone who's licensed in many states is an option that you're going to want to consider. And then finally, you might want to look at whether or not they've had any disclosures filed against them or listed on their BrokerCheck. Now, just as a reminder, we can go to brokercheck.finra.org. This is what that website looks like. Now, I took it a step further in today's presentation, and I actually looked up the name of a professional. And to be honest, I just pulled a random name out of a hat. Well, out of my head. Anyway, so when I looked at this person, this is what I found. So this person has passed 4 different exams. They've been in the industry for 3 years and they've worked for 2 different firms. But what I want to point out is that they have 0 disclosures. So that means they haven't had any complaints or actions taken against them. They're licensed in 53 different states. That's huge, right? One thing I want to make sure that I mention when I talk about disclosures is the reality is that we can't please all of the people all of the time. So because a professional has disclosures listed doesn't necessarily mean that we want to exclude them. It means that we want to take a deeper look into seeing what exactly is found. And you can actually do that by clicking in the upper right-hand corner where you see that detailed report. You can actually download that information and it will show you all the different states. It will actually tell you the exams that were passed, and it will tell you the information about the firms that they've worked for. If there were disclosures, information about those disclosures would be listed here. So this is a very useful tool to sort of help us to narrow down our options. So maybe when we started with step one, maybe we had 6 or 7 options. Once we look at step two, and that's verifying that the individual is registered, we may be able to narrow that down to, say, 3 or 4 professionals. That starts to help us get to pinpointing 1 or 2 people that we want to work with. So step 3 then takes us into actually talking with those professionals that we're considering. So we want to schedule an appointment to talk with them. Some of the questions that we may ask, and this is certainly nothing, these are not exclusive questions. These are questions that I found on the internet that really did make sense to me. Asking them what experience they have with people like yourself, someone who has worked for so many years and maybe they have some investments in a 401k or they have a defined benefit, kind of giving them information about yourself and then understanding what experience they have with people similar to you goes a long way. And then asking them if they are registered with uh, with the industry. Are they registered? Maybe they're registered by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Maybe they're registered with our office, the Pennsylvania Department of Banking and Securities, or perhaps they are with the FINRA organization, which is we'll be talking about more in just a few slides. But we also want to ask if they've had legal actions taken against them. Now, we already know the answer to that likely, but asking them about that can give us their answer, which can be very helpful. And then we want to ask questions about the types of products that they offer. Maybe that person only focuses on mutual funds and you want to have a little bit more of an option, different options to be able to invest in. Or maybe asking them if there are house products that they're encouraged to steer their clients to. And if they are, tell me about those house products. Let me know. Maybe the house products is a group of stock for a mutual fund. And then asking them if they get an incentive for selling these products to their clients. They are required by law to tell you the truth on that. And we're going to talk about the customer, this form CRS in just a couple of slides. But again, we do want to start having these conversations so that we have that open communication with our professional. And then asking them how they're going to be paid, because investment professionals are in business to make money. So we need to understand how they're going to get paid. Obviously, there's going to be a fee associated with the investments that they handle for you. But maybe ask them, given my situation, maybe you've got 5 years to retirement and you're trying to make up for lost time. Ask them what the best way for you to be able to pay for financial services might be, and then ask them to tell you why. If they can't give you a solid why answer and it makes sense, then perhaps we want to consider somebody else. And then asking them how and when you're going to see them be paid, because we want to know exactly what to expect. And then again, asking about other incentives or perks for selling specific products. Again, that goes a long way in showing us kind of where their mind is going to be focused. So step 4 is once you've had the chance to interview those potential professionals, compare the information that you've gathered. Hopefully you've asked the questions sort of in the same way so you can compare apples to apples. So then compare the information that you have about how they're going to be charging you. Maybe compare the information that you found on BrokerCheck and then look at those answers and use the information so that you're able to make an informed decision so that you can decide what is good and what may not be so great for you in your circumstances. But as we're doing that, we also want to take a look at that Form CRS that I mentioned. So Form CRS stands for the Client or Customer Relationship Summary. And basically, all broker dealers and investment advisors are required to provide this Form CRS to all of their new customers. This actually was put into law last summer. And what's cool is the investment professionals are required to use sort of the same headers. So they're going to tell you about the different types of services their firm offers. It's going to go over the fees and costs. And then it will tell you in black and white any potential conflicts of interest. Again, we go back to that whole suitability or fiduciary duty. If they have a potential conflict of interest, that tells us that they are required, they are a compatible, a suitable, they have to have that suitability. So make sure that you understand what those conflicts of interest can mean. And if there is a conflict of interest that may be listed, again, remember that doesn't necessarily take them out of the running. It just means that you need to be aware of that. And if you're comparing one or two, knowing what those different things can be goes a long way in helping us to understand and helping us to make that informed decision. If you'd like more information about Form CRS, you can actually go to investor.gov/CRS, and they have a whole page all about the client or customer relationship summary. So they can go into much more detail. Again, in these midweek money matters, we only have 30 minutes, so we try to provide as much information as we can, trying to stay within our allotted time frame. So let's talk about disclosures, because the reality is none of us like to read that, right? It's sort of that stuff that we read when we've got a bad case of insomnia. But it is really actually very important for us to read that information, because this is where all the information about account fees, the terms and conditions, costs, what you can expect, how often you're going to get a statement, all of those types of things are going to be in your disclosures once you've decided to go into contract or once you've decided to hire a specific professional. But if you don't understand something that you're reading in the disclosures, it's really important that you ask those questions, because often when we don't understand, the reality is that's something that can have a pretty big impact on our account. So we need to make sure that we fully understand exactly what we're getting into. The other things that we want to make sure that we review on a regular basis are our statements and any other correspondence that we receive, either directly from the professional or from the firm they represent. Because unlike a traditional bank account or an account with a credit union, we don't have as much time to report things that aren't quite right. So you may know that you have about 60 days from the time you receive a bank or credit union statement to report unauthorized transactions. You don't have that luxury of that much time when you are reporting something that you're not sure about on your investment statements. So make sure that you take a look at those as soon as you get them. And then if something doesn't make sense to you, make sure that you ask those questions. Because again, you don't want to find yourself, a few months down the road, and being concerned that something isn't right with your accounts. And then if your professional can't help you to understand it, then you can always call one of the regulators. So again, my office, the Pennsylvania Department of Banking and Securities, we're happy to answer your questions. You can also call the SEC or that organization that I mentioned, FINRA. And I'll be talking about those in further detail and providing the websites that you can use to go and ask those types of questions in a few slides. Okay, so the other step 5. So we've gone through steps 1 through 4, and that included um, understanding what you're looking for. It included asking friends and family, doing BrokerCheck, that interview, and then taking a look at the information, the disclosures, and those types of things. Step number 5 is sort of that thing that we want to continue to do on an ongoing basis. And that means that we want to continue to learn about investing, knowing the risks associated and whatever potential growth there may be. Continuing to learn ensures that you are continuing to be the best informed investor that you can be. But make sure that you find reputable sources like the ones that the Department of Banking and Securities provides. Also, many firms have very robust web pages and they offer consumer education information as well. So, checking out your firm's educational area can be very helpful in helping you to understand the types of investment products that they offer. But I encourage you to read as many resources as you can so that you can learn about all the different aspects to building wealth, planning for your retirement, and protecting the assets that you already have. Because if we don't do those 3 things, when we find ourselves in the position that we're hoping to retire, if we haven't done those things, we may find that we come up short, and that's what we want to try to avoid. So step 5 really is sort of a long-term important thing for us to do. So let's talk about step 6. Step 6 is really also very important. It's knowing the signs and the red flags of fraud. Because the reality is, we can work as hard as we can to build our assets. But if we fall victim to a fraud or scam, that money, that our assets can be lost in a matter of minutes, really. So when we're talking about investment fraud, we want to think about, someone's offering us very quick, much higher than average return on our investments. So maybe they're going to tell you that you're guaranteed to make 15 to 20% return on your investment in 6 months. What's the reality of that actually happening? That's the thing that I'm talking about when we talk about the red flags. Another red flag is someone pressuring you to make an investment right now. So maybe they tell you that here's this great option, but shares are selling quickly. And if you don't send the money right now by wire transfer, or even worse, they'll tell you to buy a gift card of some sort, whether it's iTunes or to the local big box store, whatever it is, that's a red flag. Investment professionals that offer legitimate opportunities are going to give you the time that you need to research the information. They're going to not pressure you to send money in weird ways. They want to have legitimate investment money. And then another red flag that we need to be concerned about, and this is sort of an after, like, you've had this relationship with this person for a long period of time, and that professional maybe asked you to allow them to be the executor of your estate, or they ask you to consider leaving them a sum of money in your estate planning. Those are big red flags that we need to be aware of, because that really is a complete conflict of interest that we need to be aware of. So make sure that you are aware of the warning signs of fraud. Again, like with all the other topics that we cover, I could talk about the red flags of investment fraud or other types of frauds and scams until I was blue in the face, and we wouldn't cover it all. So that's why, again, we go back to, this is sort of the tip of the iceberg. and we encourage you to learn more as you go forward in time. So I want to provide you with some of those resources that I've mentioned today. So the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority is FINRA. That is sort of the self-governing body of investment professionals. But they have a really great website for investors to be able to learn about investing. So if you go to FINRA, FINRA.org/investors, that's a really great way for you to learn more about saving and investing for your long-term future. The North American Securities Administrators Association is another really great resource. This is an organization that is made up of regulators like the Department of Banking and Securities that come together to regulate the industry within their states, as well as to work together to provide resources for investors. So if you go to NASA, NASA.org, and in the top right-hand corner, you'll see a tab called Investor Education. They have some fantastic videos that are nice and short and target very specific aspects of investing. So I would encourage you to check that out along with some of the other educational materials that NASA offers. And then the last resource that I want to provide you with today is the Securities and Exchange Commission. They have a public-facing website called investor.gov. They have, again, some really great publications and materials that can help you to learn more about hiring a professional and about some of the other investment topics that we've covered. I want to tell you that our Office of Consumer Services is available during regular business hours. They can be reached at 1-800-PA-BANKS. And what's fantastic about that is when you call that office, as long as one of our 4 staff are available to answer your calls, they will answer and provide you with answers to your questions. They'll give you the appropriate resources, or they'll invite you to send in a written complaint or inquiry, and they can get a response for you from the regulated entity. You can also go to our website, dobs.pa.gov, and click on our reports and publications, and we've got some fantastic materials as well. All of the resources that I have mentioned today come from non-commercial regulators that have something to do with the industry. So you can count on the material to be non-commercial educational materials that's not going to give you, some other person's perspective. It tends to be, like I said, non-commercial and strictly educational. So make sure that you check out those resources. So next week, we're going to continue with our how-to series, and we're going to be talking about how to buy stock. We're not going to be talking very much about opening that brokerage account. We're going to be focusing on what we need to do and understand so that we can make a wise investment when we decide we want to purchase individual stocks. So we'll talk about some of the strategies, sort of the steps that we need to use to make a decision on what stock we want to buy. If you haven't already done so, you can register for next week's event at padobs.eventbrite.com. We are in all through August, we're actually covering a sort of a how-to series because we are approaching our 100th session of Midweek Money Matters, and I am so excited that we're going to be able to reach that sort of landmark event. And I hope that you'll consider joining us in the middle of August when we have that session. So I want to thank you so much for your time and participation today. My name is Katrina Boyer. I am the Investor Education Coordinator at the Pennsylvania Department of Banking and Securities. And here is my contact information. If you have questions after we conclude today, you're welcome to email me or give me a call. I am going to stop our recording now.